Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new video. So the video that we're about to watch is the presentation that I made at the Cactus and Succulent Society of Australia's April meeting. This is the second time that I've been a guest speaker. Absolutely amazing evening and a really fantastic audience as well. So the talk's going to start in just a couple of minutes, but before we do, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. And the first point is, and this was raised by one of the society members, during the slideshow, when we're looking at the names of cacti, you might notice that I have capitalized the first and second part of the name. This is botanically incorrect, and given the environment in which I was presenting, I probably should have had things botanically correct. The second part of a cactus name should be in, the first letter should be in lowercase, not uppercase. It's a personal preference thing for me because I find it easier to read if each word is capitalized, but botanically speaking, that is incorrect. Also, few little technical difficulties on the night, which makes it all that little bit more fun. And also, unfortunately, the Q&A at the end, the recording cut out. I recorded it myself. The society also recorded it on their equipment, and on both recordings, it's incomplete. So I've cut it off where the question goes basically unanswered. In the presentation. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the video and love to hear your thoughts about it. All right, everyone, enjoy the show. Alrighty, hello everyone. So tonight we're going to be taking a look at the wonderful world of cactus flowers. Looking at slide 2, please. So I think many people, when they first think of cacti, the first thing that comes to mind is spines. And certainly for a while that was the draw card for myself. Next slide, please. But now, all I think about when I think of cacti is flowers. So my obsession with these incredible plants and their blooms, more specifically, started after seeing this flower, which is the next slide. This was many years ago, as you might be able to tell from the quality of the photo. Not a rare plant by any stretch of the imagination, but there was something about the symmetry and the vibrancy of the white that caught my attention, and shortly after seeing this, I started steering my collection towards flowers almost exclusively. This one's also fragrant as well, so absolutely worth getting yourself one of these plants. You'll probably be able to find it down at Bunnings. As I said, they're not rare at all. So yeah, completely and utterly captivated by cactus flowers. So they generally, cacti as a whole, generally flower pretty readily without much fuss. Some do take a little bit more effort than others, but mostly they're pretty easy to get to flower. They generally flower in the spring and the summertime. However, Areocarpus flower in the autumn. And they have incredible flowers as well. So it's really nice that when spring and summer is finished and the flowers are all spent, that you get that sort of second wave from the Areocarpus. Keep in mind, however, these things are incredibly slow. Even grafted, it's painfully slow. This one here is 3 years old on Perisciopsis, and it just actually flowered for the first time. This photo's only a week old, so absolutely beautiful colour on that one. There are, of course, the rebels amongst the cacti who flower whenever they please, and a prime example of that is Mammillaria. They do not care what season it is, whether they've been watered or not, they just do as they please. Fairly small flowers on the Mammillaria, but I think the goal for most people who grow them is to try and get the full crown. I couldn't find a photo of mine with the full crown, but they're absolutely fantastic. There are some with larger flowers. Fraliana is one, which has a white flower with a pink stripe. And then the other one, which has very large flowers, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, Gupsumana or something like I don't know if anyone knows how to say that properly, but that one has very large double flowers, absolutely beautiful. There is an endless array of colours and forms. Plenty of them are neon almost. So you get your yellows, your pinks, your reds. They're absolutely beautiful. The only colour that's probably not represented is blue, which is fairly common amongst plants in general. The other colour is black. Now, black is present in some cactus flowers. In particular, there's a Libivia Jejona. I'm sorry, pronunciation is not my strong point. Luckily, the cactus don't care. So that has a black throat. And I've been reading whispers online that there's people who are working towards emphasising that or trying to get it to follow on to more of the flower structure. But to date, I haven't seen anything too remarkable come of that. But I think there's absolutely a lot of potential there. Go to the next slide, please. Now, of course, flowers aren't complete without scent. Fragrance isn't hugely common amongst cacti. Plenty of them do have fragrance. Most of them fall into sort of the citrus sort of category of scents. It's a very pleasant citrus, not like cheap dishwashing liquid. I don't like that fragrance. So it's a very fresh and bright and zesty citrus, but there's always those floral undertones. My personal favourite, which is this one up here, is Cactus Viridis. And this one had Divisi on the last bit of the tag. This plant came from Lester Myers close to 10 years ago now. This one here has a fragrance that I would say is almost identical to a true English rose. It is very heavy, it's very pungent, it's absolutely delightful. So if you've got several flowering cacti that have fragrance in a greenhouse, you can walk in and absolutely be hit by a wall of fragrance. It's absolutely incredible. Now, if you're wanting to track down some scented ones for yourself, the first one that I would recommend would be the Echinopsis that we saw at the start. They have a nice lemony scent. A lot of the Astrophytum Myriostigma, they are scented as well as Echinopsis. So absolutely easy enough to get yourself some scented flowers. So I think a lot of people don't know that there's actually a fragrance, but it's absolutely incredible on a lot of them. Now, the thing about the fragrance is what I've found is that it can be somewhat of a random occurrence. So for example, I've got several of the same type of Gymnocalycium. One will have the fragrance and then the others won't. So I'm not sure whether it's a genetic mutation or whether it is there's other factors involved, such as environmental things. Not too sure. Fragrance is absolutely one of those avenues that I want to pursue further in the future. I think there's a lot of potential there as well. So before we get into the eye candy of the evening, don't worry, there's plenty of flowers coming up. I wanted to take you through my top tips for maximising your cactus blooms. Go to the next slide, please. So the first thing to consider before absolutely anything else is that the cactus must be old enough to flower. When we're looking at seed-grown plants, the time frame can be anywhere from 1 year up to a few decades. Thankfully, most seed-grown globular cacti, that's the round ones, I don't grow many columns for flowers yet. But most of the globular ones will flower from 1 to 5 years old when grown from seed and not grafted. Grafting pretty much bypasses this waiting entirely, with most flowering within 1 to 3 years. This excludes column cactus. There's not much cheating with them. They need to be a certain size and a certain age before they're going to flower. So don't go grafting a Trichocereus and expect it to flower in 2 years. It's not going to happen. In saying that, the globular cacti can be so fast when grafted that it is entirely possible to go from seed to seed within a single season. It's not easy, but it's absolutely achievable. If that's too much of an abbreviation, what I mean by that is taking the seed, planting it, sowing, grafting that seedling, and by the end of the growing season, that plant has flowered and produced seed. So you're looking at anywhere from like sort of 6 to 8 months that you can have that turnaround time. So, it's certainly a fantastic advantage for the impatient, which I fall into that category, or if you're working with hybrids and you're requiring rapid generation cycles. Again, I fall into that category too. Next slide, please. The next point is fertilizer or available nutrients. Now, sorry to say, but fertilizer is not the magic answer to getting your cactus to flower. It absolutely does play a role, but I don't think that it plays as significant a role as what we might expect in traditional garden plants. So they're not heavy feeders. They, of course, have nutrient requirements, but you don't need to pile on the fertilizer. Now, myself, I feed my cacti once per year, twice every 3 or so, on or around the 2nd or 3rd water after winter. So as we're coming into the growing season. My go-to is Thrive, and this is something funny. I've been calling this fruit and flower. I've been using this almost exclusively for 10 years. I call it fruit and flower. It's flower and fruit, so there's a fun fact. So this is my go-to, and I use it at half strength. I want to stress a point, especially with cacti and fertilizer, is that you absolutely should avoid excessive fertilizer with cacti. It leads to lush growth, making your plants very susceptible to rot, pests and diseases, and furthermore, there's not really that much of a payoff in terms of flowers. What it can lead to is abnormal flowers. It's nothing interesting. What I mean by that is that the flowers can appear from within the ribs. It's horrible. Gymnocalycium do this if you over-fertilise them. So don't over-fertilise them. All you're doing is putting your plant in harm's way for no reason. Now, if you're using a mix that is higher in organic matter, or for plants that are grown in the ground, fertiliser may not be required at all. I do not, nor have I ever grown cacti in these mixes. I do have a few that are in the ground. Now, just some Trichoceros spacianus. They flower without me giving them any attention. I do not water them, I do not fertilise them, absolutely nothing. Well, there is one thing, I'm just trying to think of a polite way of saying this. They're the lemon trees of my cactus collection. I'll let you fill in the blanks. So they flower without planting. This season was significantly drier than the previous one. I live up in the mountains. We've been in a rain shadow for about a year now. So very little rain. So not as many flowers, but still more than enough, and they still produce seed, which is what they were for. Go to the next slide, please. So the next point is light or sunshine. Now I grow cacti with a lean more towards a cultivated look, and as such I run a minimum of 50% shade cloth at all times of the year for all my plants. As summer approaches, I do apply or put up additional layers of shade cloth to give some plants a little bit more protection. But the aim here is to provide as much light as possible without causing sun stress, discoloration or marks on my plants. I want them to look pretty. So I am quite liberal with the shade cloth. This is one of those things that you will have to assess yourself based on your location, because there's so many factors that can play into how a cactus responds to light or sunshine. So for example, my greenhouse is very large. It's 4 meters across by 10 meters long. So a 50% shade cover might be perfectly fine for plants in that situation, but if you have a smaller greenhouse, it is going to get much hotter, much faster, and so the 50% might be insufficient because your plant is not only dealing with the sun, it's also dealing with extreme temperatures. So just something you'll have to sort of chop and change and work out what's going to work best. The point of light or sunshine with respect to flowers is that light levels that are appropriate to the plant in reference to the body will not affect or prevent blooms. My Gymnocalycium and my Lophophora, I have a very sheltered end of my greenhouse. I run 2 layers of shade cloth all year round and a 3rd layer in summer, so it's quite dark. But the Gymnocalycium and the Lophophora, they burn easily, or they get ugly easily, and they live perfectly fine under there, and they flower without problem as well. So find the right light levels as much as you can without burning the plant, and once you get to that point, you'll have the right light levels for the flowers. Now this one here is, in my opinion, the most important factor for maximising blooms. Not saying that your cactus won't flower without this step, but for me, I think this is the most important. And that is a cold and dry winter. So my plants go through a wintering process that is anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks long, and during that time they receive absolutely no water at all. By the end of it, they look horrific, I'm not going to lie. They look awful, but it is a natural process for them, and they do bounce back, and they look fantastic again. There's no lasting damage from this. So they absolutely do bounce back, and they look brilliant. But if you look closely at the upcoming slideshow, you'll actually see that several of the plants are flowering while they're still very dehydrated from the wintering process. Very shrunken in, they look half dead really, but they'll still flower. Which leads to the final point, and next slide please. And that's water. Now I'm not going to go into watering with respect to general care of cacti because that's a topic that's worthy of its own discussion. But just to give you an idea of how water does play a part, obviously it does, but the first flush of flowers comes through mostly in spring and summer, and they are triggered by an increase in temperatures and also by watering. Your during season flowers, they can be a little bit fickle with some. Echinopsis is probably the worst for this, and that is if they're not provided with enough water or they feel the conditions aren't right, they'll abort flowers or they'll drop them. It doesn't happen all that much, but it absolutely can. I don't respond to this. I maintain my watering schedule, whatever is appropriate for that particular type of plant. So sometimes I lose flowers, but an alive plant is much more important than a few extra flowers. During the season, you want to make sure that your cactus is well watered, but within the means that it should be. So if you go flooding it with water in the hope of getting more flowers, yes, that might happen, but you then also run the risk of killing your plant. So of course, like everything with cactus, nothing happens quickly. So the tips that we've just gone through should be viewed as a very basic framework for a full cycle ahead, regardless of the current season. So implementing any one of these steps is not going to have an immediate response. Cactus don't work like that, they work on their own time. So those are my top tips, and now we move on to the main event. So most of the images were taken within the last 18 months. They are all of my own plants. I do not edit or fiddle with the photos other than basic cropping or just cutting out excess photo. So all of the colours are as they appear. Sometimes the camera has a little bit of a hard time dealing with the vibrancy, so some of the images the colour has blown out. The slideshow goes for about 10 minutes, a little over 10 minutes, and then at the end of that, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. With that being said, let's roll the clips. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the flowers. They're always much better in real life, but that gives you a little bit of a sampling of what's out there. It's not even the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even seen the iceberg at this point. So I know that the succulent fans outnumber the cacti fans, but hopefully this might sway you over to the dark side a little bit. Come over to the spiny side, it's fun. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
Do you know any of the cactuses that hold their flower longest?
The longest hold? Okay, so in terms of which ones are going to hold them the longest, Libivia are pretty good. They'll open and close a couple of times. Yeah, if you're wanting flowers and a plant that's easy to care for, Libivia is pretty much a safe bet. They're very easy to care for. Plenty of them will grow in the ground. They flower from a young age, and yeah, they'll open and close multiple times. Stay away from the echinopsis because some of those you've got around 15 minutes to photograph it before it starts flopping and looking awful. So yeah, you've got to catch those ones at the right time. But Libivia would be my first recommendation, but I am biased. Yeah. Yeah, heaps, heaps. So you can have the smaller ones. So the arachnacantha will stay quite small. They're quite common. Lots of flower colour and variants with those. But then there's some that grow almost column-like, absolutely enormous. I don't know a lot about those particular ones, but no, there's some absolute monsters out there. Does it flower?
It has flower, yeah.
Yeah, now, most of them are, if you're worried about something getting too big, most of the Labivia are quite small. The other thing is you can always sort of bonsai them a little bit and keep them in a very small pot. I repot around every 5 years. I put it up as much as I can, and that'll keep them a little bit smaller. Sorry? Oh, you got to get columns then. Yeah, got to get columns. If you want big flowers, I mean a lot of the trichocereus flowers, they're almost dinner plate size. They're enormous and they smell heavenly as well. So. Yeah, well, that's where I'm sort of moving into a new venture now, and that's getting into the things like flying saucer, and there's a lot of hybrids out of America, which are enormous flowers, every colour you can imagine. I've got a few of them, I think around 13 or so crosses from a pretty famous grower in America, but there's going to take quite a few years to see those. Yeah.
What do you take your photos with?
I use my phone.
All the time?
Yeah, all the time. I got the, what is this?
It's got all the one lens.
No, it's the new Samsung. Apparently it's got a good camera. It takes a bit of getting used to, but I just use my phone, yeah. I think maybe in the future I'll get a, yeah. Technology's not my strong point. Yes.
What's an average time of being flower formed?
So, do you mean like as in across several months, or flushes? Because some work in flushes. So
how many days will they flower for to get the most popular ones?
Well, I'll reference the video again. They're my favourite. I might miss that. But they will get several flushes throughout the season, and there's some that are still going now. So they'll flower. You might get anywhere from 1 to 10 buds that'll come up on them. They'll open and close over the span of a few days. You might have a little bit of a lull. A lot of them will take a break at the peak of summer. A lot of them don't really like the intense heat. So if you were to get a little selection, you could very easily have flowers from spring all the way through until autumn.
Each one only lasts a few days.
Oh, so most of them will open and close a couple of times, so across a couple of days, but some of them 1 day. Yeah, an hour at best at its peak.
Don't go away then.
No, you must stay home when you can't flower. It's not optional. Take it to work, yeah. Do what you got to do. Cash in that sick leave.